edition of hashtag Ride and Vibe, y'all. I am your host, DJ Freedom. This one is going out to my YouTube family only. I'm not doing it on Instagram, but you can get broadcasts of this show every Wednesday and Saturday from 3 to 3:30, and then from 3:30 to 4. Now I'm gonna break it down for you so you can understand what I'm doing and how I do it. From 3 to 3:30, I do hashtag Ride and Vibe. That's ride share for New York City. I'm talking about drivers, talking to drivers, and I'm talking about passengers in New York City as it pertains to New York City. From 3:30 to 4, hashtag Ride Share Rodeo. I didn't even need to do a different name, but I like the Ride Share Rodeo name so much, I wanted to put it to work. And I had already been doing Ride and Vibe since last year, so I wanted to keep that momentum, even though I didn't consistently do it from week to week. And I played around with the idea of doing it from week to week and ultimately decided, all right, I'm going to do it from week to week. But here's the thing. Doing this from week to week means, for me, that it's best I do it while I'm doing rideshare or just before or in between. This show is being done at night. This is actually going to connect to what would have been my Wednesday edition. Everything I'm going to share with you in this show, in this video cast, is going to be about what I would have been saying to you on a Wednesday. So hopefully, as you watch this and listen, you'll be able to learn what you need to learn. Take some notes. I'm not going to be very technical here. I'm going to be less technical and more layman's terms today. Sometimes I can be technical with these shows, but today it's going to be straight from the layman's terms because I need you to understand what I'm talking about. From the top, the show is produced by Go Right Away Auto. Go Right Away Auto is my company for rideshare and all matters pertaining to rideshare, including my fleet and everything regarding rideshare, basically. This car that I'm driving in. Now, I'll tell you about me, I'll tell you about my car, and then we'll get into the business. Because I don't always tell you about me, the car, or why I'm in this business. So I think if I give you some insight to me first, you'll be able to understand how this is even happening right now. DJ Freedom has been a DJ since 1984. When I started out, 1982, correction. When I started out at 12 years old, I didn't have a plan. I just knew that I wanted to play music. And I did it very well. I got good, I did well. I made great money playing parties, house parties, eventually nightclubs, and traveling up and down the East Coast. I met a guy named Dason Hamer. Big shout out to Dason. He introduced me to the college circuit. And a guy named Mike Borland, who was a DJ as well, phenomenal DJ, real nice guy. We ended up partnering and doing a lot of parties together in the college circuit. I went back to doing my club gigs and was a promoter as well. promoter meaning I produced the parties. I made a great deal of money DJing and promoting. Eventually, when things dried up, I left New York and went to DC for a while. Then came back, eventually went to Greensboro by way of some young brothers who had plans to introduce New York flavor to the South. They had been coming to New York for a while. In fact, one of the guys I remember him from buying my mixtapes all the time. Oh man. It's late. I'll tell you about that later. Yeah, I know that. The car is on a low battery. I'm going to charge it right now. So I left Greensboro in 96 to 7 because the birth of twin boys would change the course of my life forever. I got knowledge of self, came Freedom Justice Allah, decided to eat right, live right. I'm going to do this for my children. I did very well in the beginning and went through some bumps and bruises. Fast forward to around 2000 or so, I met my former, who I would eventually have a son with. And from that relationship, I moved to Houston for a while, for about 3 or 4 years. Moved back to New York in 2004, 5. Went through a period of homelessness with that former. Never told this story before. Came out of it, realizing the system wasn't going to help us. Moved back in with the family. Moved in with mom. Back in. 2006, I met a lady who was managing a nightclub in Brooklyn, Williamsburg. She invited me to sit down with her to talk about some events, and eventually that relationship went from business to us being good friends. She made me her assistant manager, and we became roommates. There was nothing romantic between us. We were just good friends. She really put me on, and I have to thank her. Her name is Sarah P. That's all I'm going to say about that. From moving to Brooklyn in 2006, 7, I worked at this club for about 6 months, 7 months, made great money, was on my way to doing some real things in music again, for the first time in a while since I've been living in Houston. Wasn't meant to last. The club went out of business, and in the summer of 2007, I met my wife, who I am still with to this day. We went through our fair share of changes over the years, as any good relationship will. Ultimately, we have made it to the other side. In 2018, well, I'll dial back, because in 2004, I left this out. I started a travel business and did fairly well for a short period of time. I didn't have a proper game plan. I went from host to host, and eventually that business went belly up. By 2017, I formed Mix to Go Music Group, and by 2018, I had applied for my TLC license to be able to do rideshare. I was able to get the license in the fall of 2018, but the problem with getting it in the fall, in September of that year, the TLC decided to cap your ability to get a license, to get plates put on your car, commercial plates. So now I'm speaking to rideshare drivers. If you are a rideshare driver, you already know about the vehicle cap. For you passengers and just casual observers, when the vehicle cap was put in place, that prevented drivers from being able to put commercial license plates on their cars. You need commercial license plates in order to drive in New York City. There are a few other cities that require you to have commercial licensing, but New York is one of the ones that has always required this for taxi drivers. A lot of taxi drivers slid through the cracks over the years, but when I applied for my license, I simultaneously went out and bought a RAV4, 2012 RAV4, which I still have with my wife Martina. But that car would have been a great car for rideshare. It would have been fantastic, man. I'm telling you, I would have made a whole lot of money with that car. But it wasn't meant to be. Thanks to the TLC shutting down drivers plating their own vehicles. So, couldn't have played it. Instead, towards the end of November 2018, I found a company in Queens that was renting cars to TLC drivers. I went and got a Nissan Altima. It was a 2016. It was in fairly new condition. And I'll never forget the day that I went to go pick this car up. We had one of the worst snowstorms that we've seen since that snowstorm. That was definitely the worst snowstorm. I think we may have even had others. It snowed since then. But that snowstorm was the worst snowstorm that New York City has seen. And so, with that, I started doing rideshare. Now, prior to that, I'm going to have to pause so I can plug my car in, y'all. And I'm going to stop the music, too. I'll tell you about that mix in a minute. I'm not going to stop the video. But I had to turn the car off so that I can go and charge my car. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. Please don't go anywhere. Just bear with me. I drive with no shoes on. That's what I'm doing right now is I'm putting my sneakers on. The sneakers match the shirt, y'all. Whoa. I'll be right back. Bear with me. This won't take but 30 seconds. Tops 30 seconds, y'all. 30 seconds tops. In the background, right? Yeah. I'm out here in Long Island charging my car right now, y'all. Indeed. This won't take very long at all. Good thing I brought a sweater tonight because it's getting cool outside, y'all. Woo. Next time you see me, I'm going to have the sweater on. machine started up. With the information, I should have actually showed y'all how this works. That would have been great. I'm already here now, so next time, okay? Meantime, wait for me to come back. Maybe I'll edit this video to the point where it's just me getting out of the car and getting back in. So voila, here I am now with a sweater on, and it got cool outside. So I'm at 10%. Usually it takes about an hour to get to about 98%, 99% perfect, because that'll be enough time for me to sit here and finish telling you what I need to tell you this morning. Regarding my story, I want to apologize to you only because it wasn't supposed to be so long-winded. But I wanted to really give you some background about me in this video. And another time, I'll talk about alcoholism, my alcoholism, and how going through the system saved my life. It opened my eyes to the problem I had with drinking. I really, initially, I can be honest, and I'm going to just give you this little bit. I can be honest and say the reason I went into this program at the time was the rumors of getting out sooner made me think, sure, I'll learn about alcoholism, but I'll be able to go home sooner too. Well, I did go home in less time than I would have originally, because originally I got a year and I ended up spending 6 months in the system over some things that I used to be into, which I will not discuss here. But I will tell you that is behind me. But the alcoholism became the end result of that experience, of those experiences. So that was in 2011. I was out by 2012. So yeah, man, my story has got layers to it. And I gave it to you in bits and pieces. I'll definitely give you the chronological order another time. But I wanted to give you this background information in great detail because every driver has a story. One thing I know about a lot of drivers that I've communicated with in my 2 years of being a rideshare driver, many drivers did not dream of becoming rideshare drivers. They may have become taxi cab drivers and made that a career, but I sincerely doubt anybody was thinking about driving with Uber, Lyft, or any other rideshare company, primarily because it didn't exist till the millennium began. In 2018, now we're back into my story about what I did to get my license and when I got the first car that I drove. I applied for my license in February, March or so. I think it was March, April. It was somewhere around there. Because I had just gotten my DMV license just before that. So I was moving fast. I was not playing. I was on a mission to get everything done. I got my DMV license. I applied for my TLC license. Like I said earlier, that came through in September of 2018. However, there was a vehicle cap in place that prevented me from being able to put plates, commercial plates, on my RAV4. But I, along that path, met a lady named Michelle. I oftentimes don't name Michelle. But Michelle is important to me. Michelle has been my saving grace in this business. Had it not been for Michelle, I would not be sitting in this car. I would not be doing this video talking to you right now. I promise you, this wouldn't exist. So I owe that sister my sitting in this car. And I'll share this with you also. I met her at a meeting. The TLC has meetings in the communities around New York City, at churches and community rooms and things like that. And they talk about what's presently going on with rideshare in New York City for the drivers and for people who live in those communities. But mainly, it seems to mainly be geared towards the drivers. At least that's what I got when I went. I met Michelle in June of 2018. I hadn't gotten my license yet, but I told her my story and she gave me her card and told me to contact her, and and she was just wonderful. She was wonderful then, and she's always been wonderful. She, along with the other stewards at IDG, do wonderful work helping drivers and educating drivers and the general public, still largely blind to what IDG does, because it really does pertain to drivers. And you passengers who may be looking at this will likely never really know about this organization known as the Independent Drivers Guild. Because what Michelle did, she introduced me to a lawyer who used to be a lawyer for the TLC. And eventually she went into her own practice and decided to begin representing drivers. She is a wonderful person as well. Had it not been for her, I wouldn't have gotten my license, because this is why I said what I said to you about my background. Because when you go and apply for your TLC license, and then you go and apply to Uber to become a driver, Uber, Lyft, all the rideshare companies do background checks. And while they accept drivers who have criminal records, they want to know what the charges were. So I had to go and get some paperwork taken care of. I met Gail, the lawyer that I was telling you about, through Michelle at an IDG meeting. And what Gail told me is to go ahead and follow the bouncing ball. The TLC told me what I needed to do to get my license approved. And so I began to go back and forth to the courts in New York and Brooklyn and the Bronx even. And I got everything cleared up and I was on my way. The last step, the TLC decided to call me in to do a meeting in person because I had to make a case for myself. I don't remember if this is something that they do with all drivers or not, but they did it with me, and I'd like to think that they do it with any drivers who are questionable like me. But I went for the meeting, and I was able to meet with the present day TLC lawyer of that time. It was actually two of them, two ladies, and Gail was there with me. My wife Martina was there with me. Well, to make a long story short, I made a case for myself. Gail helped me a lot because I was nervous and I didn't say and do everything I said I planned to say and do. But I got the license. Obviously, I got my license because I'm here. Now we fast forward to November of 2018. I'm in a Nissan Altima. The year is 2016 of that car. It's in fairly new condition. It drives well. It's comfortable. And I spent a lot of time in that car for about 4 months. But it was never the goal to rent only. I began to look into ownership of my own vehicle. I went to Buggy. I went to Tower. I went to American Lease. And I went to Luxor. Luxor said they would do the deal, but they were going to charge about $5,000 down. They offered no money down if your credit is good. Well, at the time, my credit was still growing. I think I was in the mid 600s or so, low 600s or something like that. I could have gotten a car from other places, but I didn't want to keep running my credit. What I should have done was let them keep running it, because if you do so during a short period of time, and this is something that I'll address in another video about credit, why it's so important to have good credit. It does pertain to rideshare. My credit was building. It was getting better, but it wasn't good enough for me to get a car from Luxor without having a deposit. So I ended up driving this Nissan Altima until the early part of 2019. Oh man. It's almost 3 a.m. That's what this is. This is fatigue, and maybe it wasn't the best time to do this video right when I'm tired like this, but my mind is sharp, y'all. Everything I'm telling you is important, and I want you to bear with me as I tell my story. The next thing I did was I went on Craigslist looking for used rideshare vehicles, and I found a lot. I also found companies that were willing to sell me a car that had plates on it, and they would include maintenance, meaning they would take care of the car if anything happened to it. I just had to commit to paying $400 to $500 a week. When I first signed up, these rental car companies offered TLC plated vehicles along with maintenance for $300 and change, just a little over $300. By the time I got there, it was between $400 to $500. Now that was just for a Toyota Camry, 2016, 2017, not even a new car. And if you stay renting in that fashion, you will pay for the car in a year to 2 years. Think about it. What's 400 times 50? That's over $20,000 in 1 year. So if you just rent for 2 years, you basically bought the car, but you don't own the car because you've been renting for 2 years. So you paid for someone else to have $40,000, over $40,000, and you, on the other hand, are still renting it. And now you've been renting it for 2 years. So what is the benefit? There is none. I had a gentleman from Luxor last year when I went to go and finally get this car. If you're renting for more than 6 months, you don't need to be in this business. long term because you're wasting money. Well, that was always my thinking, to get my own plates on my car. That was always my thinking right from the start. I told you the story. So let's go through the cars I drove in that first year, last year. Pardon me. I did drive that Nissan Altima until early spring 2019. Then I found on Craigslist a guy who had Infiniti QX60s. He had a whole fleet of them, all different years, 2017 up to 2019. I happened to get the 2019 Infiniti QX60. It was a brand new car. I had a little mileage on it, but it was mostly a new car. Man, that was an experience driving that car. I did that for about 3 or 4 months. But I'll tell you something. I left out one little detail. At one point, between me getting the Nissan Altima and getting into the Infiniti, I had acquired a Lincoln MKT 2016. Kind of looks like the PT Cruiser that came out back in like 2000 or 2001. Kind of looks like that a little bit. Some people say it looks like a hearse. In any case, I got into a Lincoln MKT for about a month, 1 month. And it didn't work out because I couldn't put license plates, I couldn't add my name to the insurance. How did I drive for a month? I drove for a month because initially I was able to temporarily drive the vehicle using the guy who owned the car, who had a fleet of cars. By the way, he also had TLC plates on the car, and the car was already insured. So all he had to do was add me on. Because he couldn't add me on, and because I didn't like the idea of owning a car that was already a 2016. And by the time I finished paying for it, it would have been 2020. It would have been this year or next year. It would have been next year because it would have been 3 years. Keep in mind, this vehicle is a 2016. So if I finish paying for it in 2021, best case scenario, that means I've more than paid for the car. Not a good deal, right? And by the way, that Lincoln went for, I think, $22,000. I know. So, you're gonna pay, pardon me, family. If you're gonna pay $22,000 for a used 2-year-old MKT, you may as well go ahead and buy a new car. So that became the plan, to get to a new car. I went on Craigslist, found an ad for dealers that sell you TLC licensed vehicles. One thing led to another. I was going to get a minivan, a Sienna minivan, 26. Yeah, I was going to get that. So I got approved for the wheelchair accessible vehicle. It was a 2017 Sienna, Toyota Sienna, 2017. And the problem with that vehicle was I didn't have $5,000 to put down. So they told me about a Nissan Leaf. I went in to see it, loved it, fell in love with the idea that I would be charging my car for the rest of my driving career. And that has been fine. Car's only up to 37%. I'm gonna start this video. Pardon me. I'm gonna just tell you my story, y'all, because I think it was important that I tell you my story today. That's why I'm just vibing with you on that. But it was good for me to get into these different cars and eventually this Nissan Leaf. My experience with Luxor was great. Those guys helped me get into a new car, which is what I always wanted. It was fairly new. I should be technically correct here and say it was fairly new because it already had I think it had 9,300 miles on it when they gave it to me. Now it has about 19,000 miles. I've driven a lot in the shortest possible time. But necessary though, right? Yeah. So, the Nissan Leaf has been good to me for the last going on 5 months now. I've had it since February 2020. And when I got it, just weeks before pandemic, funny how the universe works, man. And yet, I'm still here. I'm still in this car. I've been able to work all the way through the whole pandemic, 3 to 4 days a week, and I'm doing fine. I wear a mask. I didn't in the very first few weeks. And my passengers played around as well. But now I wear a mask. And I hope you all do too for the time that this is going on. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. My sincerest thank you to B-Box Radio for allowing me to stream on their platform for a while. Also want to thank the drivers that I come in contact with at the charging stations like the one I'm sitting in front of. That's the light you see glowing. And also to my family, my wife in particular, my son in particular, wonderful spirited people. They deserve more. They deserve more. So that's all for now, folks. I am sleepy. I'm going to take a mini nap, and then I'm taking my car home, at which time I will rest and reboot and do a Saturday edition of this show later. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Social distance. And I will talk to you again soon. Peace.